All right, we're on.
All right. What's up, Brooks?
Not a whole lot, just out here in beautiful Austin, Texas. We're getting up to 90 degrees, baby.
That's right. It's about 80 here in Central California today. Um,
Beautiful.
so anyway, I know you and I were just talking, but we're going to start doing these regular videos, a little Q&A. If anybody has any questions about addiction or recovery, or they want to know anything from the perspective of an addict in recovery, I myself, I have 7 years clean and sober, and you know, myself and Brooks, we just want to share our experience in any way we can. I don't know. You got anything you want to say before we start, Brooks?
I mean, just brief intro. Yeah, my name is Brooks, and I've also been sober for over 6 years. And Jared and I got clean together at a place in California, a structured program, long-term program. We kind of started this group because we know what really worked well and us getting sober and staying sober, and what's kind of helped us continue to go down that path. So wanted to offer our perspective to anybody that's currently going through that with a loved one.
Yeah. And I think just a disclaimer, really, Brooks and I, we both really believe in a non-medical approach. We both really believe in changing the way you live, changing your habits, your actions, kind of an action-based recovery. We both are huge into fitness and an entire lifestyle change. So that's the perspective we're going to be coming from. It doesn't mean that, there aren't other ways to get clean and sober, because there are, but this is the way that worked for us. This is the way we know worked. And so that's the perspective we're going to be sharing from. So I guess we could jump right into it.
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and read off the first question here.
Good.
What should I do if my son is on waiting lists across the country for rehab programs? I can start with that one if you want. I would, I think that there's a lot of people that, are trying to find the program that takes their insurance, that, will allow them to go in and, insurance accepted, or with the VA or whatever channel they're going through. And there's a lot of programs out there that maybe are private pay, that if you let them know your financial situation, would work with you. So not just expecting somebody to say no. If you call a place that may look like it's outside of your budget, or even outside of your area, I think, like you said, that you're looking across the country, but regardless, just, the internet's a great resource, and being able to talk to people and just kind of explain your situation, I think, is a good way to go about it.
Yeah, definitely. It's really being open-minded in general. Like you said, not being afraid to call, not being afraid to ask questions. There's, a lot of free programs too that are good programs. Not having too much pride to look into some of those. They're not the most comfortable. A lot of them, you got to work for your stay, but in a lot of places, or in a lot of situations, that's a really good thing. I know a lot of people that have gotten sober in Salvation Army programs. I know a lot of people that have gotten sober in, teen challenge type programs, things like that. So there are options out there. I know it's difficult right now with COVID-19 going on. A lot of places aren't taking any new people. But I just had a talk with the Santa Barbara Rescue Mission the other day, and they're starting to take people back in again. So I think things are starting to open back up now, even out here in California. So, don't give up hope, and don't be afraid to look into everything you see, and don't be afraid to let people know your situation and tell them you can't afford something. And a lot of programs will work for you. A lot of people get into this, industry because they care about people and they want to help people. So there are options out there.
Absolutely. So on this next one, we've got, what advice do you have that could help me speak to my child about their addiction? She doesn't think she has a problem.
I can jump in on that one. First of all, for me, my family really couldn't be the ones to talk to me about my addiction. That just never worked out for me. That relationship, nope. Usually when you have an addict and a parent type relationship, that is so strained and so dysfunctional, once you get a few years into your addiction, that, the trust is gone probably both ways. The parents are trying to save the kid's trying to deceive the parents. It's a difficult situation. I think it's always best to try to get the help of another addict or alcoholic in recovery, get their feedback. I know in a lot of situations, for me, my mom was always trying to get me to talk to therapists, counselors. I mean, you name it. I just wasn't interested. I mean, I really wasn't. It didn't come until I lost all options that I even started to become willing to talk to anybody. It wasn't until I was literally sitting on a curb on the street, going through my phone, trying to figure out who I could borrow money from, and realizing that I owed everybody in my phone money and I had nowhere left to stay, that I was even willing to talk about anything. So sometimes it's a tough road and a long road, but people have that moment where they want help, but it's just important to take advantage once you hit that moment.
Definitely. And I think one thing that you can do is learn more about codependency, and Al-Anon is a really good resource for that, or Nar-Anon. They will help you at least speak to them as effectively as you can, or maybe get somebody else to speak to them, but learn more about what you can do in their relationship with them so it's healthier. And like Jared said, like, addiction just breeds unhealthy relationships, manipulative relationships. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not the fault of the parent. A lot of parents blame themselves for their kids' addiction. I think it's important. My perspective on this, since I got clean and sober, has always been that, I don't sit around anymore and try to figure out why I'm an addict. It doesn't really matter to me. A lot of people want to know, did you have a traumatic experience? What happened to you? Why are you that way? Is it genetic? I don't know. I lean towards genetic on a lot of levels, but it really doesn't matter. The healthy mindset is getting into the solution for both the family and the guy who's struggling. So the sooner you can get into the solution as a parent, the sooner you can get into Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, and you can start healing. All you can really do is be an example.
Absolutely. On that note, our next question here is, did you resent being asked to only come over when you are sober? I can take that one, I guess. I think that my family was they had just it was the new normal that I was messed up all the time and I was always intoxicated. I think, I didn't really resent it. I think that everybody was on to what I was doing, and I didn't really care at that point. And I was pretty inconsiderate of other people. I can't say that I really resented other people. I knew what was going on and why they didn't want me there.
Yeah, I think it depends on the state of mind that I was in during the time period. I mean, the thing is, when you're in that, for me, when I was in that state of mind where I was waking up every day and trying to figure out how to get drugs and just trying to figure out how to survive that day without getting sick. Almost every reaction I had to everything was some form of manipulation. So, the only time I acted like I was upset or acted like I was offended by something, it was because it was some kind of a play to keep being able to get money or keep being able to have a place to sleep. Or, almost every reaction I had was planned, thought out on how I could keep this machine going of waking up every day and finding at least $30-$40 so I didn't feel sick. And that's, once you get to that point, you're not really talking to a person anymore. You're talking to somebody who's saying whatever they can to keep that thing going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Next question here, along the same lines. How can my daughter come around and be as good as gold for 2 weeks and then turn her back on me and her kids for months? Manipulation, right?
Yeah, it's hard to explain the frame of mind of an addict. A lot of that could be manipulation, trying to get something out of somebody, coming around, trying to act good to get to some kind of an end goal. I could hold it together for a while. A lot of times if I was promised, hey, if you do good, we're going to help you buy a car. Or, hey, if you do good, we're going to help you, get a place. Or I could really put on a good show for a period of time. And once that, I don't know, once it starts to slip, that first day you're feeling sick, that first day, it just, it all falls apart. So it's
Yeah.
kind of hard to explain, but it's, yeah, like you said, I think probably manipulation would be the answer.
If we're talking about like a 2 week period, she's coming around and doing it for 2 weeks, then there's something in that 2 weeks that she's gonna get, or like there's something that she's gaining from being as good as gold for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and then turning her back. Maybe she's building up a little bit of trust and then abusing that, but that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, that's what I would say too.
Nice. All right. Advice on mental health, getting someone to treat mental health issues once they are sober. I can start on that one. I know that we led with we believe in a non-medical approach, and that's what we mean by that is like, the first resort after getting sober shouldn't be like getting on Suboxone or methadone or like medication assisted treatment. That we believe in, abstinence-based recovery. On that note, if somebody's dealing with severe like chemical depression, and somebody's dealing with suicidal thoughts or schizophrenia, there's obviously underlying mental health issues that need to be dealt with there. So we're not saying that like people shouldn't seek treatment for those. I think that cognitive behavioral therapy, along with the right medication, non-narcotic medication, is usually the most effective route to go with that.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely agree. And I think it's important to remember, looking back, I don't feel like my brain started to level out until I was sober for almost a year. I mean, I was a roller coaster for 8, 9, 10 months of up and down. And, I've been to treatment centers and therapy and, diagnosed with psychiatric disorders. And, it's a lot of the symptoms of addiction mimic a lot of psychiatric disorders. And that's not to say that they don't go hand in hand, because in a lot of cases they do. I mean, right now I manage a homeless shelter, and my experience there has been much different than my experience in managing sober living homes, where in the sober living homes, I feel like a lot of people are misdiagnosed with psychiatric disorders when really what they have is drug addiction. And in the homeless population, it seems like the exact opposite. So there's definitely both sides of it, but I think it's really irresponsible when people are giving people psychiatric diagnoses and putting them on all kinds of medication when they only have 5, 6, 7 days clean and sober. I mean, that's so hard to do. I was such a wreck at that point in my life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was taking benzodiazepines every day for over 8 years at a dose that was pretty much comatose. And, getting off of that for the first 2 years were hard. So, I could have, definitely been diagnosed with severe anxiety at that point, but I wrote it out and learned how to deal with it. So I think you have to take, the effects from the drugs and like the, you know, kind of the side effects of coming off and withdrawing, and put that separate from actual like long lasting mental conditions. So,
Yeah. And, as an addict, the idea of a pill being able to fix you is really exciting. You know what I
oh
mean?
yeah,
I'm always looking for like, oh, I just need to go see that psychiatrist. They're going to put me on something and it's going to clear all this up. And, I won't have to deal with this anymore. And that's something you can chase for a long time, looking for that pill that's going to fix your addiction without having to do any work on it. And, that was never the case for me. I remember, looking up different psychiatric disorders and the symptoms before I went into the psychiatrist's appointment so I could try new drugs. You know what I mean? Like, oh, maybe this one will help me out or make me feel better. Today I'm going to see if they'll diagnose me as bipolar. Tomorrow I'll see if they'll diagnose me with chronic anxiety. I mean,
yeah,
you're just always looking. The idea of not taking something for me was just beyond my comprehension. I couldn't imagine waking up and not taking a pill and going to sleep and not taking a pill. I mean, that was something I couldn't even imagine. So breaking that pattern alone is so difficult. And if you automatically offer people medications and drugs, I mean, that's tough. But I think, the question was how do you help people deal with that? The most important thing is like I said before, a lot of that can't come from a parent. It's got to come from another person in recovery, somebody who's going through the same thing. If my mom's calling me, telling me that I've got mental health issues, that I need to go see a psychiatrist even today, I'm probably not going to be too receptive of that. I need to talk to somebody who's been what I've been through and knows what I'm going through.
Absolutely. And I think it's important you have a physician that understands addiction and not somebody that's like making a profit off of prescribing Suboxone, which is a huge kind of sub industry within the psychiatric community, but finding somebody that's like either, I know I had a great doctor that was in recovery that kind of understood the deal, that was apprehensive to like write a bunch of scripts while I was early in recovery. So I think finding the right healthcare person is important as well. Next one here is, what point did you decide to get help? What made it work this time? What would your parents do differently?
Well, I mean, I can start to take that one. When I decided to finally get help, it wasn't really much of a decision. I wasn't one of those people that had this like aha moment where all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm going to start getting my life together now. It was, for me, I ran out of options. I got dropped off at a program that was a long-term structured program, the one that you and I were both in. And I didn't have anywhere to go. No one was going to pick me up. And what changed it for me was, I always thought that I had the mental strength or the discipline to get clean and sober by myself. And I didn't really believe in all of this, like I'm powerless over addiction. I can't control it. I was never really even willing to look at that. And it wasn't until I was in that program for a few months and I started to hear the guys around me stories and go, actually, their stories do sound a lot like my story. And I started to make those connections because in my head, I was always different. Like I wasn't weak enough to be an addict. There was no way I was going to figure it out one day. It was just once I got some situations figured out in my life, I would flip the switch and be fine. But it was sitting in the rooms, hearing stories of people and going, oh, wow, that does sound like my life. And this guy seems to be doing well. Maybe I should take a look at this. And that happened slowly over a period of 7 or 8 months. It wasn't a one-time wake up, okay, I'm going to change type deal for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I was kind of strong-armed into it, at least to a degree. I mean, I was miserable. I had a seizure from alcohol withdrawal. I had gotten kicked out of a sober living home. I was in Santa Barbara. And it was basically like be on the street or take this offer to go get help at this place that's highly structured, long-term, no cell phones, no laptops, no girls, no nothing. Very, very strict program. And I was miserable enough that I just said, at that point, I'll do whatever is asked of me.
Yeah.
And I was a little apprehensive, but I think that's a huge part of what made it work for me was the desperation of, hey, I'll listen to these people that are clearly doing better than I am in my life. And I think what my parents did differently was they drew a hard line in the sand. Finally, it took a long time of me manipulating that codependent relationship and just, kept pushing and milking everything that I could out of it. And they were finally just like, it was sad. It was pathetic. And I kind of realized that and was embarrassed. And there was a lot of, part of me that was like, I'm capable of a lot more in this lifetime. I always had the idea that I could accomplish things and be successful and go to school and get a job and be productive, but just never really had the opportunity. So kind of the stars aligned and it actually worked this time. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, next question. Do we have to wait for our kids to go to rehab or can we convince them? I just right off the bat, if they're kids, it depends on how old they are. If they're minors, you can pretty much force them into a recovery program. I know that I was when I was a teen, and I'd like to think that some of those programs saved my life, even though they weren't effective long term. They at least got me out of a really dangerous situation for a while.
Yeah.
Um, so if they're older than 18 years old, or depending on what country you're in, I guess, I think that you can try to convince them and try to lay out the facts and do an intervention style deal, but that isn't effective every single time. There's no one answer to that question. Like how you can convince them. Everybody's different, but
Yeah. I think it's the same thing. It's about, being an example, taking care of yourself. This is like you said, if they're adults, it's about, find your Al-Anon meeting, find your Nar-Anon meeting, find your support group, lead by example. Addiction is a family disease. So, you have to get your help. Even today in my life, I mean, I obviously, it's our passion to help addicts and alcoholics, but there's a lot of people out there, a lot of friends of mine that I grew up with who are still struggling. And, I can't spend my energy chasing those people in the street. I have to live my life, and I have to be an example, and I care about those people. But, I have to set the example by being productive, by taking care of the things I need to take care of in my recovery. And I think it really is the same for parents. It's not supporting bad behavior. It's not feeding into their addiction, not enabling, and showing them that you're doing your work, and hopefully that inspires them. But that's kind of the option, unfortunately, a lot of people are limited to.
yeah, absolutely. Drawing the line, not letting them control your life anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we got a longer question here. Okay. Seeking advice on our particular instance. Since discovering drug use relapse after 4 years in recovery, since a clear show of inability to stop on his own, he claimed he could, I have hidden his truck keys. The only reason I have done so is because the truck is actually financed and the loan is in my name. Since I would not be willing to gamble, risk the stability of having, using, or keeping the vehicle, since it is currently the only legal, safe, or running vehicle in our household. But there's part of me that feels that this is wrong because other than the finance loan in my name, it has been his truck. I feel it as part of my boundaries, risking the stability of a vehicle and financial stability, but I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing or if I'm hurting the situation by creating feelings of control, imprisonment, punishment, etc., etc. He's so mad and thinks it's about control, but I believe in my heart that if the loan were not in my name or had another dependable vehicle to provide for my family, I would have surrendered as I work my own program. I would have reached acceptance about it if he had left, lost, or wrecked his own vehicle. I just need to know.
Well, first of all, I think you have to take care of yourself and your family, first of all. If that's the only running vehicle in the household, then you doing what you have to do. I get it. I understand that. That makes sense to me. But I will comment on the fact, like we said, addiction breeds unhealthy relationships. And if you're at the point where you're hiding keys and stealing keys from a person, if you have any option to separate and work on yourself while that person works on themselves, those kind of relationships are so hard to heal in at that point. I've seen it so many times. People need time apart to heal. And that's my first opinion. I don't know. What do you think, Brooks?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell by the question if like drunk driving or intoxicated driving is involved in the situation. I would imagine it is because I know it was for me. And I know that part of the catalyst for me getting sober finally was getting arrested on DUI, and that being a real wake up call. And I'm really grateful that that happened in retrospect, not for the court fees and that whole situation, but because of what it caused in my life. So I would say that, if you need to involve the law in that situation, if something, you don't want to look back at the situation alternatively and be like, oh, he went out and killed somebody in the truck and I could have kept the keys from him because the loan was in my name. I think that you're doing the right thing. I don't think it's about control. I think that, it's obviously there's a valid concern, and that you don't want him, losing, wrecking, or whatever with the vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I just want to reiterate, you got to look at what's best for you in those situations and take care of yourself and let the addict take care of himself and figure that out. I mean, I know how hard it is to live in those relationships where you're hiding things from each other, you're stealing things from each other, you know, it may all be out of love and care and all that. And, like I said, I think you're doing the right thing, but ultimately, you both obviously need space to heal if it's gone to that point. And, set your boundaries, stay firm on your boundaries on what you expect if you're going to live with that person or be with that person, and really hold to those, because, that's a tough life to live right there. Waking up,
Yeah.
hiding things and pouring out bottles when people are asleep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all that stuff is, gosh, that's a nightmare that you
painful.
don't want to live. You don't want to live that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, somebody's life is a hell of a lot more important than any sort of material possession, a truck, whatever that might be. So I think that, like, while this situation sucks, I think that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. I actually had a situation very similar to this where my mom disabled my car because she was fearful that I was going to kill somebody in it. And, at the time I was furious. I was so mad. I thought somebody was trying to steal my car and broke it. I didn't realize it was her that did it. But, I mean, she was definitely right. I shouldn't have been operating a vehicle. That's for sure. But it was a sign that our relationship had got to a point where, it was just a nightmare to be around each other, and I had to go away and heal. I had to, because I wasn't getting any better from there, and I definitely wasn't listening to anything she was saying. So it was pretty unhealthy at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. This next one definitely resonates with me a lot, having started my journey at, like, going to rehab for the first time at 16. So
Yeah.
it says, my son is 15. In the past few weeks of his 90-day residential treatment, he went from weed and alcohol to different hallucinogens in a short span of time. He told us he needed help and seems to be making the most of his time there. We're just trying to be prepared on how to best accommodate him when he gets back. Part of me wants to put locks on the windows and doors and make a really strict environment. Then there's part of me that wants to give him an opportunity to earn trust. Al-Anon has been helpful for us, but it would be great to get y'all's point of view. Jared used to run a youth program, actually, so you might have a little bit more insight right off the bat.
Yeah, that's a tough question, and it's there's no clear-cut answer to that. I think it really depends on the kid and where the kid is at and how the kid is doing. You can imagine being 15, 16, 17 years old is hard enough and confusing enough, and then you throw addiction into the mix, and you have that natural desire to start becoming your own person and splitting from your parents at that age. And it's rough. I would say clear boundaries are huge. As far as locks on the windows and things like that, I mean, you do what you feel like you have to do to keep your kid and your house safe. But I think building a relationship is important, and that the kid doesn't feel like they're in prison is also important. I mean, I can speak. I ran I managed a sober living home for young men, and I can tell you, each kid was so different in what they needed. Some of them needed a lot of structure, and some of them just needed time to heal from a lot of bad situations. So, I'd really need more details to comment on that completely, but I'd say structure is always huge. Purpose is always huge. Being involved in, activities, whether they be after school activities, sports, whatever it may be. I mean, feeling like a normal kid in that kind of a situation is huge. I don't know what your perspective is, having gone to programs that young, Brooks, but that's what I would say from that side of it.
No, I mean, I totally agree. I think my situation was made, a little bit different. I got sent away to a similar like 60-day residential treatment place, and was, weed, alcohol, hallucinogens, pills, a lot of stuff. And a lot of the guys that I went through the program with ended up going to sober living homes in different states, that were specifically for youth. And some of those guys are still sober today from, when they got sober at 16, 15, 18, whatever. So I manipulated my family into letting me come back home after that, which was the worst thing that could have happened. And they gave me way too much autonomy and trust right off the bat. And I got high right when I got back and had friends over for like a, welcome home party. So, it was something that, like, I think if you look at it, if he wants to get high, if he wants to get loaded, he's going to, no matter what. No, if there's locks on the door,
Yeah.
you can't cage a human being. So that's so, it's a tough situation. But if I could go back in time, if I were my parents, I would have sent me to the most structured, the place that would have set me up for success would have had a lot of structure and emphasis on like school, learning, sports activities, like getting me involved with things. Because you come back and, like, what do you know? Your friends that you get high with, and that's the easiest thing to go back to.
Absolutely. I agree.
So cool. All right. Our final question here. My son is currently in long-term treatment. He's made a lot of progress, but he still struggles to get up on time and be motivated for the day. He is 17. The facility is working with him, but they're also asking me for suggestions. He's diagnosed with depression and anxiety and currently on Prozac. Any suggestions for motivation? His DOC was weed, but he had started taking Xanax right before he was admitted.
I'm just going to say, and I don't want to bash any programs or treatment centers. I don't know what kind of a place you have them in, but right off the bat, first thing that jumps out to me is if he's in a program where he's allowed to lay in bed throughout the day, you really might want to look into putting him in a place that's more structured and a kind of place that won't tolerate something like that. I mean, those places have to have boundaries too. And if they're asking you how to deal with, your addict, you're the person there, it's
a red flag.
That's a red flag for sure. I would never, when I was managing sober living homes, and I would never call a parent and go, "Hey, this guy won't get out of bed. What should I do?" That's not a question they should be asking you. I don't think.
Yeah, totally agree. I think, I had friends that went to boarding schools and structured places growing up, and I think just from the limited information you've given us here, it sounds like they're too lax, and if they're asking you for suggestions and they're not making him get up out of bed, if he doesn't feel like there's consequences when he doesn't get out of bed on time, I mean, that's huge. It sounds like a minor thing, but like getting up every single day on time is, as any of us working adults know who are accountable and have jobs and live in the real world, it's an important part of life. And if you don't teach that to your 17-year-old, if they're not getting that from the program, you may want to reconsider. That being said, back to the original. Okay, you're asking for suggestions for motivation. What do you think about motivation?
I mean, I'm going to go back to the same answer we've given a lot. A lot of that can't come from the parent. You have to make sure they're around the right people. You have to make sure they're in a structured environment where, like you said, there are consequences for not getting up on time. I mean, for me, this hits home for me because, being in a structured environment where I had to get up when I was tired, and I had to do chores when I didn't want to, and I had to make my bed when I didn't feel like it. I mean, all that stuff was important. I remember having a big brother or a mentor in my program when I was telling him that, I have trouble with being messy, or I struggle with making my bed. And he looked at me like I was out of my mind. Like, how do you struggle with making a bed. Like you get up and you make the bed. It has nothing to do with your addiction. It has nothing to do, for me, it was so important that I was no longer able to use my addiction as a crutch in my life. I was perfectly capable of being a, responsible human being and a responsible adult, and getting up and taking care of the things that I needed to take care of. And that's where you start to find pride, and you build on that, and you gain motivation out of that. But there's no like inspiring speech or anything you can give somebody for that. It's more just they have to get in that rhythm, and they have to be put in the structure where they do get in that rhythm.
No, absolutely. I think having been 17 in a facility where they prescribed me similar medication to Prozac, and I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, like my thought is too, like, again, not a healthcare professional, but is he depressed and anxious, or is he 17 in a sober living environment while his friends are going through high school and living a normal life?
Yep.
That's something to consider. And that's one of, I guess, the qualms that Jared and I have with the kind of status quo of the rehab treatment center mentality, which is like, pretty much by default, okay, this person is abusing drugs or alcohol. They must also have underlying mental health conditions. So let's make sure to put them on medication right away, instead of like making these life changes in the way that I live my life every day, the structure and the principles that I'm living my life by. And, am I like, do I feel like I'm doing something that has purpose, like you mentioned? So,
yeah, absolutely.
but that was actually our last question here. So, yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. We're going to be posting this to our YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
and we hope to make this, at least a monthly thing. But we'd love to hear feedback from you all if this was helpful, or if there's something else you'd like us to touch on next time. Yeah, anything else from you, Jared?
No, thanks everybody for watching. Like Brooke said, we are more than open to any feedback. If there's, any additional questions you want us to answer next time, or if there's anything you feel like we missed and you want us to touch on more, please reach out. Please follow our Facebook page. We'll have a link posted next to this video for both that and our Facebook groups. And thanks for watching. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And if you can subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get updates when we post new stuff, it would be greatly appreciated.
All right.
All right.
Good talking to you, brother.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.